Hi everyone! I know it's been a few days since we have uploaded some of our read aloud, so I'm really excited to continue on. It's Friday, I've got my whiten gear. I hope you're rocking your Uxbridge apparel too for Spirit Week. So, without further ado, Chapter 17. So, I know you don't go to therapy anymore and all that, but my mom and I were browsing online and we found out there's this social event for kids with Tourette's over at the hospital, I said, walking next to Connor on our way to class the following week. Connor stopped and turned to face me. You mean a support group? Well, sort of, I said. I don't need a support group. I'm totally fine. I just thought it would be cool to meet some other kids who have the same thing as you know? Maybe even make some new friends. Actually, it had mostly been Mom's idea, but she thought it would be best if I brought it up, so Connor would be more open to it. Connor raised an eyebrow at me. I don't know. It would be just as much for me as you, I said. It turns out I like kids who have Tourette's, and I don't have all that many friends. So I'd like to go and see about making some new friends in a place where I'm not the only kid who's sort of different. Connor continued giving me his skeptical look. Really? Well, I looked up support groups for kids with no arms, and guess what? There are none. At least, not that I could find. I guess Tourette's is a lot more common. 1%, Connor said as he turned and continued walking toward class. What? 1% of people have Tourette's. See? I blurted. I bet lots of kids with Tourette's go to this social event. Support group. Whatever. It might be fine. Please, will you go with me? Please, I begged. Are you saying you'd go without me? He asked. Why not? Because you don't have Tourette's? Well, I could just meow from time to time. No one would know. Connor gave me a playful shove. Fine, I'll go with you, he rolled his eyes. And you won't have to meow. Mom walked us into the hospital just after 7:30. A receptionist directed us down a corridor and into a small meeting room. Mom promised to pick us up in front of the hospital at 9 o'clock sharp and left us there to brave the meeting alone. As we entered the room, we were immediately greeted by a boy shouting, "Chicken nipple!" I looked at him in surprise, and he shouted it again, aiming it at no one in particular. I glanced at the other kids in the room. 5 boys and only 1 other girl. What's with all the boys? I whispered in Connor's ear. Tourette's is way more common for boys. Connor barked as we stood there surveying the room. The other kids didn't seem at all fazed by his barking, but they watched me with curiosity. That was okay. A pretty woman walked into the room and introduced herself to us. I'm Andrea, she said, shaking Connor's hand. Are you Connor? Connor nodded, barked, shrugged, blinked his eyes. He was nervous, I could tell. And you're Avon, Connor's friend? Andrea said. Nice to meet you, I said. Why don't you two find a place to sit and we'll get started? I could see Andrea also had Tourette's by the way she made a funny counting motion with her fingers. But other than that, she seemed to keep it under control. I wondered if she had a milder form of Tourette's, or if she had learned to control it. If so, I wanted to find out how for Connor. Chicken Nipple Boy moved over a seat so Connor and I could sit next to each other. He yelled out, "Chicken Nipple!" as I sat down next to him. Then he leaned over and whispered to me, Do you have Tourette's? I shook my head. No. Oh, Chicken Nipple. I do, in case you, Chicken Nipple, didn't notice. I grinned at him. I wasn't really sure. I'm Dexter, he said. Chicken Nipple. I'm Avon. Well, Andrea said, sitting down at the circle, I guess we can get started. Everyone, we have a couple of new friends with us tonight. She turned to us. Why don't you guys introduce yourself? Connor was ticking badly, so I spoke. I'm Avon. Avon doesn't have Tourette's, Andrea said. Yeah, I laughed. Can you imagine? What a doozy that would be. Dexter laughed out loud and shouted, Chicken nipple! And the other kids softly chuckled a bit. I liked Dexter already. At least if you had Tourette's, the completely monotone, expressionless girl sitting across from me said. You wouldn't have to worry about slapping your face all the time like I do. As though on cue, the girl slapped herself in the face. Yeah, but you should see what Avon can do with her feet, Connor said, blinking his eyes rapidly. Face slapping isn't that far-fetched. I want to, chicken nipple. See what you can do with your feet, Dexter said. Maybe later if we have time and Avon doesn't mind, Andrea said, smiling. She clearly enjoyed the light-hearted conversation among us kids. And honestly, so did I. Andrea turned her attention to Connor. Introduce yourself, Connor. I'm Connor. I do have Tourette's. As if you couldn't tell, he barked. Well, welcome you two, Andrea said. We're so happy to have you. Why don't we all go around and introduce ourselves? We'll start with you, Dexter. Chicken nipple. I'm Dexter, and as you can see, I love to say chicken nipple. Chicken nipple. Connor gaped at Dexter. I have to know, why chicken nipple? Why not another word? Dexter has a rarer form of Tourette's called coprolalia, Andrea explained. He says words and phrases, some of which people may find inappropriate, but he can't help it. Connor turned his attention back to Dexter. Yeah, but why chicken nipple? Dexter laughed. Sometimes I say other, chicken nipple, things. I'm glad when it's just chicken nipple. Chicken nipple. Sometimes I say barbecue, or pirate ship, or I love bubble baths, and some, chicken nipple, other things. Sometimes I say my own name, which is really embarrassing for some reason. One time, I went through a short period, chicken nipple, when I said, I'll punch a baby every time I saw a baby. That was awful, chicken nipple. People would run away from me with their chicken nipple babies. Dexter looked at me with a straight face. Chicken nipple. I swear I would never punch a baby. I like babies. I believe you, I said, trying to maintain a straight face. Just then, Dexter cried out, Barbecue chicken sandwiches! And everyone laughed, especially Dexter. I normally would never in a million years laugh at someone's disability, but I realized we were all laughing with Dexter. Certainly not at him, and it was okay. I think it made everyone feel better in a way. Josh introduced himself next. Josh made the same whooping sound all the time and had what Andrea explained were several motor tics. This included bending over a lot and sort of like playing air guitar. Other than that, Josh was quiet. The girl introduced herself as Rebecca. I already knew Rebecca slapped herself in the face. She even wore little padded gloves to help soften the blows. I had never realized Tourette's could be painful, even damaging to the person who had it. Rebecca also grunted and coughed a lot, even though she didn't have a cold or anything. Jack rolled his eyes constantly and shook his head. He also made a strange yelling sound like nothing I had ever heard, like he sucked in air so fast it made a shrieking sound. Zachary rolled his shoulders so much, he feared he would need surgery on his already worn-down 15-year-old joints. Mason made constant farting noises with his mouth and pulled on his hair, which made his hair patchy because he pulled on it so much that some of it would come out at times. Mason had over 50 tics, he told us. I couldn't imagine having to deal with that many uncontrollable things going on in my body. Besides Dexter, Mason's tics were probably the most embarrassing of the group. He hardly ever went out in public, like Connor. Andrea guided us into a discussion on how we felt about going out in public. More specifically, going places like the movies, library, etc. Connor wasn't alone in not liking to go to the movies. No one ever really went. Rebecca was the only one who felt okay going to most places, because her vocal tics weren't as loud as the others, and could almost sound normal at times if you assumed she just had a bad cough or something. People still got annoyed by her frequently, though. As cool as Dexter was, he was terrified of going out in public. I guess he said, "I'll punch a baby," in front of some dad holding a baby in the drugstore one day, and the dad nearly attacked him. Had Dexter's mom not intervened, it could have been bad. Once again, I thought if he had been wearing a t-shirt explaining he had Tourette's, maybe the situation could be avoided. Dexter also had obsessive compulsive disorder, which Andrea explained often accompanied Tourette's. It was hard for him to leave the house because he worried so much that the stove and oven were on at home. He even asked if he could call his mom a couple of times during the meeting so he could have her check them. Andrea let him. It sounded as though most everyone's parents were supportive and understanding of their Tourette's. Well, everyone except Connor's parents. Some of their extended family members, such as aunts, uncles, and grandparents, often accused them of faking it for attention, like Connor's dad did. I thought it would be exhausting to put on such an act all the time. I couldn't fathom why anyone would want to do such a thing, or how anyone could think they were doing it. It was difficult to hear everyone speak over the cacophony of barking, farting, whooping, shrieking, and chicken nipples. But it was also strangely comforting. No one cared about my lack of arms. They were all far too caught up in their own struggles. And I, for once, felt completely normal among this group of misfits. I hoped Connor felt the same way and would come back with me again. "So, how was the meeting?" Mom asked as she drove us home. "It was great." I looked at Connor for confirmation. "Yeah," Connor said. "It was really good." He looked out the window. "That's great. What did you guys talk about?" "All kinds of stuff," I said. "Like what everyone's tics were and how they felt about going out in public and things like that." I could see Mom watching Connor in the rearview mirror. "Did you think it was helpful, Connor?" He said absent-mindedly. "I asked if you thought it was helpful," Mom said again. Connor shrugged. "I guess so. Yeah, it was nice to meet other kids like me. I just..." "What?" I asked when Connor trailed off. "I'm worried I'll start swearing like Dexter." "I don't really think of chicken nipple as a swear word," I said. "You know what I mean." "You heard Andrea," I said. "That's pretty rare." "Yeah, but Dexter started out like me too, making strange noises and movements, and then one day he said chicken nipple and everything changed. I guess I'm afraid the same thing will happen to me." I couldn't see Connor's face as he gazed out his window. Things are hard enough the way they are. I can't imagine how hard it would be if I started saying obnoxious things all the time. I think I'd rather have brain surgery at that point. "You shouldn't worry about it," I said. "I think the more you worry about it and stress yourself out, the worse your tics will be. And maybe if you start saying words, it will just be normal stuff like, 'I love African safaris,' or something like that." Connor chuckled. "That's normal?" "Yes, for someone who loves African safaris. I don't think you should think about it too much." "When's the next meeting?" Mom asked, obviously trying to change the subject. "Next month," I said. "They meet once a month. We should go back because we're going to talk about relaxation and how it can help when we're out in public." "You mean when we're out in public," Connor said. "You don't have to worry about that stuff, Avon." "Maybe not that kind of stuff. I may not have tics, but I still have to deal with people staring at me and treating me like I'm different." "Yeah, but you don't call attention to yourself." I think I'd give up my arms to get rid of my Tourette's. "Don't say that," I said. "I like you just the way you are." "Really?" Connor gave me a skeptical look. "Yep, tics and all." Chapter 18. By late fall, the weather was finally starting to cool down to a comfortable temperature. I had read every single tarantula book from the Desert Ridge Middle School Library, the Phoenix Library, and the box we'd found in the storage shed. I now knew terrifying things about tarantulas, like that a type of wasp called a tarantula hawk would sting and paralyze a tarantula, then lay its egg on it and seal the tarantula up in a burrow. Once the wasp grub hatched, it would feed on the tarantula meat. I couldn't wait to use that information to shock someone. I even blogged about it. I had written several more posts on my blog, mostly stuff about the park, school, tarantulas, and how I do things without arms. Pretty random stuff. So I called my blog Avon's Random Thoughts. Anyway, it wasn't about anything terribly exciting, but I had gained a few more followers. Zion now commented pretty regularly on my posts, and Emily still made her usual LOL and I miss you remarks from time to time, though I hadn't seen any comments from my other friends in Kansas for at least a week. Dad and I practiced soccer in the arena together early on weekend mornings when it was cool outside. It was wonderful to feel a chill in the air again, but every weekend I felt less and less enthusiastic about getting out of bed to go out there. I think Dad must have noticed my waning interest. He found an old tuba somewhere at the park, and he came into my room one morning, played horrible screeching sounds on the tuba, then announced, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future queen of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." I smothered my face with a pillow and told him there was no such thing as a queen in soccer. The next weekend, he played the tuba and announced, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future emperor of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." And the weekend after that, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future world dictator of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." Dad said the snakes would be hibernating now, so after we practiced soccer, I would hike up the hill behind Stagecoach Pass. I liked being able to look down on the park and the rest of the city, and I liked visiting my giant saguaro. I spent most of the time on the hill looking for tarantulas and collecting quartz rocks. I had quite the collection going at home. I wore a loose open bag around my neck so I could easily drop the rocks in with my toes. Most of the kids at school were now ignoring me completely. I guess they were used to seeing me around by now, so I wasn't getting any more shocked looks. It was more like I just didn't exist. I sat down next to my giant saguaro a while, looking down at poor old Billy and Fred, endlessly hauling kids around the dirt trail. I thought it might be time for them to retire to the petting zoo. I wondered if we could replace them with a little train like one I had seen in a mall. Now that the weather was cooling down, business had picked up a bit, but my parents told me it was barely enough to keep the park running and cover all the repairs that were building up. I stood and walked around to the backside of the hill, hoping to find some new rocks. A strand of something dark caught my eye. I slipped my foot out of my flat, grabbed it with my toes, and tried to pick it up. It was connected to something in the ground and wouldn't come loose. I put my flat back on and started kicking at the dirt, trying to unearth whatever was under there. Eventually, I loosened enough dirt to get the strand free. I laid it out on the ground and studied it. It was caked with dirt, but I could tell it had once been a necklace with polished turquoise stone set into a dark metal. I lifted it with my toes and slipped it into my bag. I rushed home to call Connor and tell him what I'd found. After all, we'd seen that necklace before. Chapter 19. Connor, Zion, and I sat outside on the lawn together before school, waiting for the first bell to ring. Connor studied the necklace while Zion flipped gently through the fragile sketchbook. Every now and then, a brittle piece of paper would flake off and we'd all gasp. Zion finally found the page that had the sketch of the necklace. "That's definitely it," he said. Connor held the necklace up. The metal is nearly black, and in the sketch it's light gray. My mom told me that's because it's tarnished silver, I said. Look at the shape of the stone and that little vein running through it. It's definitely the same. But why was it up on the hill? Connor asked, then barked. I shrugged. I have no idea. Zion looked from me to Connor and back again, his eyes huge with alarm. What? I asked him. He covered his mouth and shook his head, like what he was thinking was too terrible to say. What? I said again. Dead body, Zion whispered. Connor and I looked at each other. I don't know, I said. What other explanation could there be? Said Zion. Someone murdered this necklace-wearing person and buried her body up on the hill. Why else would it be up there? Connor looked at me wide-eyed. Rodeo clown mafia, he said and snickered. I shook my head at him and tried to remain serious. I spent a lot of time up on that hill, and I've never seen a sign of a grave or anything. It could have happened a long time ago, Zion said. Maybe bushes and cactuses and stuff have grown over it. I've heard a dead body makes good fertilizer. Connor and I laughed. That's so gross, I said. Where could you have possibly heard that? Zion scratched at his chin. I think I read it in a comic book. Oh, then it's definitely true, I said. Zion tore out a handful of grass from the ground and threw it at me. I shook my hair out. I guess there could be a dead body up there, but you'd think I'd feel all creepy when I was up there if there was. Like, I'd feel a chill or a shudder or I thought for a moment, or a tremble. Connor smiled and barked. Then almost immediately, we heard another bark from a nearby crowd. Connor's face dropped. I turned and glared at the group of kids standing near us. Several of them were covering their smiles with their hands as they snuck glances at us. I turned back to Connor. You shouldn't put up with that. Connor's shoulders slumped. What am I supposed to do about it? Normally, I would never want to call attention to myself. But there are times when my temper overwhelms my desire to go unnoticed. I stood up and shouted at the group. Whoever's doing that, it's not nice. You should be ashamed of yourself. I sat back down on the ground with a humph. Connor and Zion looked shocked at my behavior. There, I said. That's what you should do. Chapter 20. Connor and I ate lunch with Zion behind the office most days now. Connor still hardly ate anything, but he took a bite from time to time. Sometimes he'd spit his food, but he always tried to aim at the brick wall. Every now and then, though, Zion and I would have to do some serious ninja blocks when a pretzel or grape flew at our heads. I sat with the boys on the sidewalk by the office as Zion said, I think I might audition for the Wizard of Oz. He blushed so hard I could see the red coloring his brown cheeks. Oh yeah? What part? I asked him. He shrugged. I don't know. I thought for a moment. You would make a good lion. He frowned. Because I'm so fat? No, because you need to find your courage. I nudged him with my foot. I'm only half serious. He smiled. Have you guys ever done anything like that? What? Auditioned for a play? Connor asked. Yeah. Connor looked at Zion like he was crazy. Yeah, right, he said. I frowned at Connor. You'd probably be a good actor, I said. The only part I could ever play, Connor said to me, would be the part of an annoying, yappy dog. I didn't know what else to say about that, so I told them. My school back in Kansas held this playwright contest in 6th grade. Anyone could submit their own ideas, plot, and script for a play. The winner got to have their play produced. I submitted the most awesome script of all time. Wait for it, I said dramatically. Down and dirty in Kansas City. Zion snorted and a little of his juice box came out his nose. He wiped it away. What was that about? I cleared my throat. Down and Dirty in Kansas City is the story of a completely awesome ninja named Harold who lives in Kansas City and fights criminal with the help of his trusty pig named Harold. So, Harold and Harold are this crime-fighting duo who stop a gang of criminals from robbing a bank. They also fall in love, not with each other, with a beautiful vixen lady and a lady pig. The play ends in a double wedding for Harold and their partners. Connor giggled, and Zion choked on a little more juice box. The climax of the play, I continued, was supposed to be when Harold and Harold finally face off with the main villain. I tossed my hair back. Played by me. And the exciting battle to the death ends in Harold and Harold ripping my arms off and blood splattering everywhere while I drop dead to the floor. I had thought we could borrow those fake arms again from Emily's mom. Did you win? Zion asked. I totally didn't win. Plus, we had to have a meeting with my parents. They had read my play already and thought it rocked, so they were a little confused about the whole thing. I tuned out most of the meeting, but I believe the words gruesome and horrifying may have been mentioned. Anyway, this kid named Luke won the contest. His play was called Desert Moon Over the Desert. I found the title redundant, but I guess the judges thought his work was spectacularly creative. What can you expect from the same people who thought Down and Dirty in Kansas City was a stinker? Really, Connor agreed. What was his play about? Desert Moon Over the Desert was about a moon, seriously, that looks down over the desert, I'm not kidding, and falls in love with a coyote. I'm totally serious. And the coyote falls in love with the moon. Of course, the moon and the coyote can never be together, so the coyote howls and eventually befriends a cactus and everything turns out all right. Were you in it? Zion asked. Yeah, I played the cactus. My costume was this drab green, so I wasn't bright enough on stage. We had to spray the whole thing down with sparkle spray paint. We had this giant paper moon on the stage with lights behind it, so I was all sparkly and shiny from the light of the moon. It was pretty cool. I loved being up on stage, but I had the most ridiculous lines. I still remember them. I recited my lines just as I had done in the play. Coyote, the moon is many miles away, but I am here on earth with you. Coyote, my new friend, don't prick yourself on my needles when you give me a friendly hug. Coyote, if you were ever thirsting to death, I would give my life that you may drink my treasured cactus juice. Zion giggled. That's awful! I'm sure you'll have way better lines in The Wizard of Oz, I said. Gosh, I hope so. No, really, you'll love it. When the play ended and everyone clapped and cheered for us, I felt like I could do anything. I even thought maybe I could have a career as an actress. Why couldn't you? Connor asked. I gaped at the boys. How many limbless movie stars do you know? Neither one of them said anything. I shook my head and looked at Connor. By the way, Mom said I could come home with you after school and she'd pick me up before dinner. Really? His face brightened. I thought you weren't allowed to go to anyone's house where they didn't know the parents. My mom said it's okay since she knows you, and your mom works so much and sleeps in the evening. I guess my mom can't really get a good chance to meet her with all that's going on. She is going to be home after school, right? Connor shrugged and barked. Yeah, she'll be home sleeping. She worked a 12-hour shift last night. Has she ever thought about trying to get shifts during the day? I asked. She has to take what she can get right now, Connor said. And this job pays well. He looked at Zion. You want to come over too? Zion shook his head. Dentist appointment, he grimaced. The next support meeting is coming up, I told Connor. Support group meeting? Zion asked. Connor grinned. Don't you mean social event, Avon? I glared at Connor while I spoke to Zion. It's just a little group that meets at the hospital every month. Sorry, Zion, Connor said. For freaks only. Hey! I cried. No one there is a freak. Especially not you. Connor blinked his eyes, shrugged, and barked. If you say so, Avon. I let out a loud breath. Anyway, my mom's already planning on taking us. Connor raised his eyebrows. Such peer pressure. I guess I have to go in that case. Yes, you do.